things that I'd like to show you in addition to what Doug is doing in his video. We've created all these guides, and certainly we know that we can lock them if we go under View, Guides, Lock Guides, or Option Command semicolon. We can lock the guides that way and also hide the guides with Command semicolon. Tell you another thing that I kind of like to do, though. I like to think about putting my guides on their own layers. That way I can lock or hide them really simply, which is a simple click. You'll find your layers over here in the side palette here, or you can obviously find anything that is like that, a kind of a window kind of thing you'll find under window. So here's layers on that. So if I go to that, you'll see it pops up right here where this is. And you automatically have a layer when you create a new document called layer one. And we can change that and name it whatever we want. We can hide it here and we can lock it here. Well, I've already created this layer and I'm just going to go ahead and double click here and change the name of this to guides. And then I'm going to go and create a new layer. I can do that by clicking on this pull down menu that's up at the top of the palette and going to new layer. It'll bring up a dialog box where I can give that layer a name, and maybe here I'll put image. This right here, the color has nothing to do with color of any objects that's out there on the layer. All it is a way of being able to tell the different layers apart. When you select something, you'll see the highlight is in red if it's on a layer that the color associated with that layer is red. Other things to pay attention to are the show or preview. Those are things that correspond to the visible eye here that we've got. Or lock, again, we can lock the layer here as well. Print is another thing to pay attention to, is whether a layer prints or not, because we may want to put objects out onto our page that we want to use to work from as illustrations or something, but not necessarily have those print. So we can put them on a layer, say, don't print this layer, and they won't print when we go to print things. Likewise, if we put an object out there, sometimes it's easier to work with it if we have dimmed it. And we'll see more of this later on when we start to place objects and work with them from as illustrations. But for right now, let's make sure that it's show, preview, and print. We can choose what color if you want to change the colors. I try to make sure that the colors are really contrasting with whatever I'm working so that I can really see what I'm doing. I'll say OK. And now you'll see I've got that layer there. So now I can lock this guide layer and I can work on top of it and never have to worry about it. I have to make sure I'm selecting the layer I'm working on, but I can work on top here and I can't mess those guides up no matter what. I can also easily hide them. So if I want to see the thing that I'm doing without all those blue lines out in the middle, I can easily do that as well. So that's really a great way to kind of work with guides uh, rather than having to think about the keyboard commands of command semicolon or command option semicolon to lock and hide guides. You can just put them on their own layer and then do it that way. The other way to create a layer is just to go down here to the little plus sign that's down at the bottom. And if we click on that, it'll create another layer too. The difference here is it doesn't give us that dialog box with all those options. So it'll just create another layer. We can name that something else. You know, it could be objects or whatever we want to name it. We can get to that other information by double clicking. If I put my cursor on the image area and double click, it will open up the options for that. Or conversely, I could also go to the pull down menu and go to find the information here, panel options and things, not panel options, but options for that layer. to be specific. So it's really helpful to know how to create that. The other thing I wanted to show you with this is that we can create these images. Let's create something, and we'll create maybe a rectangle here. And we're going to get into these things a little bit later. Let me hide my guides for right now. And let me change the color of that. I can go here and say, I'm going to check this and change the color. So let's make that one have a blue fill and no stroke, for instance. And maybe this one will have a red fill. I can change the fill and stroke like this by simply clicking on that, and it will swap them. I have that same arrow right here, and I'm going to get rid of the stroke on that. I just want to be able to see these things separately. If I'm doing things with the Pathfinder palette, which you'll be doing very soon in the next video that Doug's got, it will tend to group these things. If we do something like a divide, or for instance, this is automatically two grouped shapes now. That means they're in the same group. Think of things like we have our layers here. Think of things that are on the layers as being layered as well. The blue rectangle in this case was on top of the orange circle. I'm going to go back to that so that I can see those things again. So the orange circles here, the blue rectangle is on top of that. The part of that orange circle is still there. I can see these things in another view that's called outline view. If I go up into view and go to outline, which is also Command Y. That's another really handy keyboard command to remember because you can toggle back and forth between outline view and preview mode. If I go to outline mode, all it's doing is this thing is still blue, that thing is still orange, but what I'm seeing is just their outlines, and I can see that the blue thing and the orange thing are both there in total. So again, I'm going to go Command Y and toggle back to the. So right now they are separate objects, but I can select them and I can group them. And now they're separate objects still, but they are now in a group together. And you'll notice I'm using this filled in arrow selection tool here, okay? So what is the difference with the one that is the white arrow down here? Well, and you'll notice too that anytime on your toolbar that you have this little filled in corner, that means there's more information there. If I click and hold on that, I'll see the other options I have here. And I can even pull that palette off of the toolbar if I need to switch back and forth between these things a lot. But what this is what's called a general select tool. That means that it selects the group or the object in total. So if the object is single, it's not part of a group, it'll select that thing. Or if it's part of a group, it will select that and all the rest of the things that are in the group. The arrow with the plus is the group selection tool, which allows me to select one member of the group and change it without changing the entire group. It's still grouped, but I'm just operating on the one object there. So that's really handy. Then there is the direct selection tool. You may have noticed these Bezier points is what they're called here. What the direct selection tool is, it will allow you to hover over one of those points, click, and actually drag and manipulate that point, right? Stuff is still part of this group, right? But now I can manipulate one member of the group as a single entity by using the group selection tool or the direct selection tool to manipulate part of that single member of the group. These Bezier points, these are curve points that have these little handles that I can do change things about the curve. We'll get more into that a little bit later, but I wanted to show you the difference between these things. Still grouped. If I wanted to, I could go back up here and ungroup it. So group is handy. That is another keyboard command that's simple. Command G for group. Command Shift G for ungroup if you want to ungroup something. But a lot of times when you use the Pathfinder palette, what it will do is it will group things. And sometimes if you want to then do something else with it, you'll have to ungroup it first. For instance, if I use the divide tool, this thing doesn't look like anything's different. And if I use the direct selection tool, you'll see that everything's still grouped together. But if I use the group selection tool, I can go in and remove pieces like that. So just keep in mind what those different selection tools will do, whether it's selecting the whole thing, if it's a separate thing, it'll select it, or if it's part of a group, it'll select the whole group. That's the general selection tool. Then you have the group selection tool, which will select a member of the group, or you have the direct selection tool, which will manipulate Bezier points and things like that. What is this last one? Well, I'll show you. Let's go ahead and select this. Still, the whole group is selected. I'm going to go into Object and ungroup it. And say I want to just select these things. It's just a lasso tool that allows me to select those objects, right? I can even select just points if I want to, and then manipulate those points. So now I've got two of the points on there, the two of the Bezier points selected with that. Okay.